Minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman, and thank you, Chairman Powell, for being here today to testify. Chairman Powell, Vice Chairman Quarles just yesterday indicated the Federal Reserve would revise its stress capital buffer proposal in the near future. Vice Chairman Quarles indicated one option would be to look at an average of stress test results over a number of years. Are you in agreement with Vice Chairman Quarles that this is something that needs to be considered, and what factors might necessitate this change, sir?
So we are in the process of evaluating, I think in the late stages of evaluating how to put into effect the stress capital buffer, which merges the results of the stress tests with the underlying overall capital framework. It's a complicated exercise. There are many moving pieces. That's one of them. I wouldn't want to single any single one out as important for our consideration, but that's one of the
So the average, taking an average of stress test results over a number of years is something that's under consideration, but is maybe a change that you're not necessitating just yet, or?
We're very much in the process of evaluating all of those ideas, and I wouldn't want to single that one out as either in or out. Just there are many pieces, but yes, that is one of the pieces.
Mr. Chairman, you said you're in the late stages. What's your time frame, do you believe, for coming up with an option in terms of the stress capital buffer proposal?
I'd have to come back to you with a date, but it would be within soon, in the near future.
Thank you. Chairman Powell, at your January press conference, you were asked whether a $4 trillion balance sheet gave you sufficient firepower to handle a future recession, and you answered yes. However, the Fed's balance sheet as a share of GDP is about where the Bank of Japan balance sheet was prior to the financial crisis. Today, the Bank of Japan has ended up with a balance sheet as large as the Japanese economy, with mixed results on inflation and limited room to handle another downturn. Has Japan's experience, sir, affected your thinking on the appropriate size of the Fed's balance sheet?
I think there are a lot of lessons to be learned from the experience of Japan really over the last quarter century, and all of us have looked very careful at that.
And to that point, if I may, why should we feel certain that the U.S. could avoid a similar fate? And perhaps you could elaborate.
What Japan has found itself in a situation where inflation has gotten down close to zero for a very long time, and they've tried many, many things, including, as you mentioned, extensive asset purchases and all sorts of forward guidance to move inflation back up, and have not met with much success, although they continue to struggle to do that. So my main takeaway from that, and by the way, the European Central Bank is fighting that battle
Yes.
as well. My main takeaway from that, honestly, is that the Fed needs to stand here and try to keep inflation symmetrically at 2%. We don't want to get on that road of declining it. To the extent inflation continues to decline and expectations decline, that will show up in lower interest rates, which will give the central bank even less firepower to react. And we see that road is hard to get off of. So I think it's quite important that we fight at 2% to keep inflation up to 2% and use our tools to achieve that symmetrically, and we're strongly committed to doing that.
The most recent monetary policy report stated, and I quote, "Consumer spending in the first quarter was lackluster but appears to have picked up." And you talked a little bit about this in your opening statement, Mr. Chairman. Can you please explain the possible variables behind lackluster consumer spending and why the recent turnaround?
Well, I think the consumer part of the economy is 70% of the economy, and it's healthy, it's strong, it's good job creation, it's rising wages. Workers' surveys show that they think jobs are plentiful. Business surveys show that they think workers are scarce. So this is a good place for the consumer part of the economy, and you see that in surveys, you see it in consumer spending and things like that.
The concerns about workforce development and having enough able workforce is very key. You're right.
They are, but I think a tight labor force is lifting all sorts of communities into the labor force, and it's good. The issue really is more now on the business side, where we see business confidence and business investment weakening a bit.
I thank you. I've run out of time. I yield back to the chair. Thank you, sir.